Welcome to Botcasters number 64 with Wayne Butterfield from Texas. Welcome, Wayne.
Hey Doran, thank you for having me. And yes, a Texan that has a very British accent. So for anyone that is confused, yes, I am British now living in Texas.
Cool. We discussed the why. But the reason you're on this podcast, very, very recently, you posted something on LinkedIn. It seemed like you were really angry about something. And I thought, I need to talk to this guy about why he is so angry about that. So please elaborate. Tell the viewers and listeners why you were so angry and what that post was all about.
That's funny. Well, first of all, you have to say my friends would never believe that I get angry about anything. I'm usually so chilled that I'm horizontal. So it was. We discussed a little bit of this before. So by way of background, I'm an ops guy who has been involved in the world of automation for well over a decade. And so, I've been doing AI since before it was cool. And we are experiencing the biggest hype around AI that I've ever seen, which is great. And it's also incredibly frustrating. I'm also a problem solver by trade. It's one of my superpowers. I'm able to work with clients to find solutions, innovative solutions to complex problems. And most of the time that uses interesting technology. And Gen AI is one of them. And my current bugbear is that we are digitally iterating versus transforming as a result of Gen AI. And we are constantly confusing traditional AI or predictive AI with Gen AI. And the reason why I was so frustrated is that there was a top 5 Gen AI user cases for finance, and at least 4 out of the 5 were not Gen AI. But it's just been this is the stuff that's been published. So there was 2 things. Number one, we were talking about the use of Gen AI for things that were not Gen AI. That annoys me. And the second one that really annoys me right now is that we're on the cusp of having a different type of technology that can solve problems that we weren't able to solve before. And yet what we're doing is we're incrementally improving something that's already been solved for a decade. So we're getting an extra 2 and 3% and thinking that we're transforming. The reality is there are problems out there that no other technology can solve, which Gen AI can. Why are we not focusing on those instead of the iterative improvements in things like customer service, customer support, etc. And that's what's annoying me is that we are stuck in a rut with regards to iterating versus trying to solve different things.
Well, it's actually very interesting. Today I had a call with a company, a software company, and they're a certain technology space. And basically nobody knows their technology is everywhere. They're all over the world. It's like Intel inside, but not even the sticker is on it. And the discussion we had was sort of similar. It's like we see so many of our clients crying for, it needs to be AI. But then we tell them what it would cost and how much time we would need to get it right. And then we say, but we have perfectly capable technology that's really dirt cheap and proven, and it always works. Why would you want to implement AI here for those 2 extra percents, but spending a ton of money and wasting our time basically to do something that we can already do with something that works? And they're like, it's like the hype. Everybody's running after the hype. And if you're not doing AI, your shareholders are probably going to be angry or frustrated, or you're not creating value, blah, 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 blah. Basically, the story you're telling is if AI or Gen AI is a hammer, all of a sudden in every company, every problem is a nail.
Mm-hmm.
which is not, of course, and that's why we use the hammer. So it's target reasoning, as I would call it.
Mhm. I think it's
Or
even worse than that. I think AI is the hammer, Gen AI is a mallet. Okay,
but
and
what's
so
a mallet?
it's almost the same thing. Sorry,
Mm.
people are treating it like the same thing. The hammer gets the nail in 2/3, and then they're using the mallet to get it in the last mile, as opposed to trying to figure out what to do with these screws. And that's the bit that's frustrating me right now, is that we have a technology that can do very different things, and yet we're so fixated on existing problems that we're not spending enough time trying to solve those other ones that are out there. And I give you a great example. I was on a panel in Dallas, downtown Dallas. It was with a service provider who were hosting it. It was myself. There was another AI lead from another consultancy, and there was two hyperscalers. And I spoke last on this initial panel, and what I heard was, you've got to do Gen AI. You've got to do it now. Yeah, everyone's moving. If you don't do it now, you're going to get left behind. And by the way, the best areas to do all of this is chatbots, it's conversational platforms. These are the things that you've got to do. And I just said at the end, I said, look, I said pretty much what I said in the post. I'm like, look, why are we fixated on digital iteration? Why are we after the extra 10% of all of these things? Why aren't we trying to do something different? And this was a travel and hospitality conference. I said, why are we not advising people that, the entire travel and hospitality industry is about creating experiences that build lasting memories? And you're talking about trying to resolve a customer service query with a technology that, in theory, we could be using to implant people into an experience to improve revenue. Like, why aren't we talking about that as a user case? What do I mean? Well, if you go on Facebook, if I say holiday, 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 right? Next time I go on Facebook, I am going to be blasted now with holiday.
Ads.
Yeah. Now, Facebook and others know who I am. They know who my family are. They have pictures of that. Look, if you want me to buy a holiday now, don't just present me with a vanilla advertisement. Put me in the experience that you want me to buy. Like, we could use Gen AI to do that.
Basically, you're saying, show me what it could be like.
Just create.
Put me on the beach.
You are exactly. You are supposed to be creating memories and experiences. That's the entire point of your industry. The entire point of your industry is not to resolve a basic query, right? That's just as a result of bad process. Let's use Gen AI to do something different. It's just one example where we have this technology, and I see a lot of this all of the time. We saw Microsoft release 2 days ago
Laura, Eva.
Viva One, where they are from a single photo. My last post on LinkedIn, I think, was the Mona Lisa singing paparazzi.
I
Right,
saw it.
and again, it's there. It's just things that happen. There's great companies, and again, I'm not necessarily saying that there's value for every business all of the time, but there are certainly problems that we have been unable to solve in even in the world of customer support, certainly in the world of marketing and other things that I would think we should be concentrating on more. The other problems should be getting talked about. And I work with a number of startups in the kind of AI and Gen AI space, and I say to them, look, if you want to concentrate on an area where there's already 6,000 of you, okay, that's fine. But there are surely it's better to be one of three solving problems than one of 6,000, right? You get lost in the noise. The iterative improvement from a basic FAQ bot to a conversational bot to a Gen AI infused bot, it's not huge. depending on which technology and how you implement. But solving problems that are from really, that are really difficult, either in something like the healthcare space or the legal space, like there's white space that Gen AI can target, which is very difficult for an existing conversational platform to ever replicate. Why? Because you don't necessarily know what the answer is. And those answers are going to be buried deep in documents. Like we have this ability with retrieval augmented generation to, as I say, to solve really complex issues, to solve, tier 2 and tier 3 type queries. And, that's where I'm telling my clients to concentrate. Let's go for something that you struggle elsewhere with. Let's really push the boundaries of this technology. Let's not just try and get an extra 10% in customer support, and add a small additional bit of empathy onto a response. We just want resolution. People just want resolution. That's what they want. Can we help resolve queries in a more efficient manner that are more complex? Yes, I think we can, and that's where I want to concentrate.
That makes perfect. Basically, you're talking about creating real business value.
That's what I hope. I think we have an opportunity to create, real and also incremental. There was another post that got a load of traction recently. There was a founder in the UK saying that he is he's basically saying that there'll be no contact centers in the next 2 years. And this one again, another angry Wayne post. I was like, I've been automating contact centers for well over a decade, 20 years, 10, 20 years. I can tell you now that the contact center will still be around in 2036, never mind 2026. The reality is that there is so much complexity as a result of context, not just contact reasons. And again, the reason why most organizations still only have a veneer of automation is because you've got things like self-service, you've got conversational platforms, like all of these things are just taking the easy stuff away. And everything that's left, the average handle time over the last 12 months has increased in most organizations on average by about 15 to 20%. And you're like, hey, we've got all these technologies, like, why is it going up? And the reality is because all the simple stuff is just being done by self-serve and conversational AI. But that complexity, the issue you have with all of that is twofold. First of all, you're like, well, we should be able to automate this because it's this type of query, change of address, say that. Sounds really transactional. The reality is there could be a load of context behind that. I want to change my address because I'm moving abroad. Okay, well, that's not, actually, I need to speak to you. Why? Because if you're moving abroad, then you need to move to this different package. Or, we actually can't do a foreign address. It has to be the UK. It's an interesting example because I've been through that one before. But the contact reason is changing of address. The context is this guy's moving abroad and our process doesn't support that. So it has to be a person. Now, in theory, it doesn't really have to be a person. It just can't be a conversational or an existing conversational AI platform. Why? Because my journey happens once in a blue moon and nobody in their right mind is going to actually write that as a journey, right? However, we do have a process for it, maybe. We do have it documented somewhere, and therefore a conversational, Gen AI conversational platform could, in theory, automate that particular process, but only Gen AI could do it because we would never have the patience or the business case to do that type of query on our own. Now, again, I'm not saying that we should have Gen AI doing this right now. You only have to look at things like Canada Air, where if it doesn't necessarily have a guardrail around process, hey, I'll just make a great refund process up. There's still things we need to do, but there is an ability there to grab this long tail if we really wanted to. But even then, I still think the contact center is going to be around for forever. So There are some bold claims being made, you know, and yeah, I'm on a crusade to add some realism, despite the fact that I've made a career out of utilizing technology and helping clients choose it. I'm not against technology. I'm certainly not against AI, but I think a dose of realism every now and then is exactly what this industry needs.
Uh, I fully agree. One of the things um, I very often call out is that if you look at the traditional conversational platforms, they actually prohibit the users, the companies that use them, to innovate because these platforms are stuck. They've had so many venture capital pouring in, invested so much in building that they cannot leave what they have because that would be destruction of capital. That so as a consequence, those customers are stuck and migrating to another platform or something else that allows them to do that. They're very very scared. I recently had a talk, a keynote somewhere where there were a lot of chatbot teams there. In general, good chatbots, big companies, and basically half of them stated that yeah, well, we have a chatbot. The purpose of our chatbot is to reduce the amount of calls. I'm like, yeah, but if that's your purpose, then and then you want to innovate, you're going to have a hard time
Mm-hmm.
because you've chosen the wrong platform.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not going to help you innovate. And they're all looking at okay, we need exactly as you said, we need Gen I. It's like this, but we don't. First of all, we don't know how, and how do we do it safely, and blah 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 blah. And then you start asking questions. A simple question, maybe you know the answer, but does anybody know if you have an iPhone? You can think this is unrelated. It is related. I'll explain. Yeah, you have an iPhone or an Android.
iPhone.
Do you use facial recognition or fingerprint?
Facial.
Okay, you're a techie, but do you know where the algorithm runs that recognizes your face?
Where it runs, it's got to be
Yeah,
local. It's got to be local on the device, I would presume.
you would presume, but you don't know for sure. Do you know where the picture or the analysis of your what the algorithm needs of your face is stored?
I would presume that would be both local and in my kind of iCloud account.
Do you know where the iCloud account? You're in the States, so it's a bit different. But do you know where the iCloud account backs up to?
No.
Here's an interesting thing. You don't know. I don't know. But most people don't know. Now, I ask a lot of CEOs and leaders in companies who handle their staff give their staff a phone, company phone. Ask them, do you know what happens with the biometric data of your employee because it's your responsibility. You're handing out the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And they all look at me as like, I have literally no clue. I said, well, you didn't discuss it in the boardroom. No, the facility manager or the buying people who do in the buying department, or
Mm-hmm.
they take care of that. Said you, so you don't know where the biometric data of your employees go, and you have a lot of laptops also with biometric data. Here's the interesting thing: if you look at legislation, European AI Act and GDPR, you are at a crossover because there's something of an algorithm and there is personal data and very important personal data, and nobody knows where it's going or where it stays or what happens. And companies are responsible. So basically, I'm not sure, but I know you're at a crossover of both. Um, is it legal? Is it illegal? Or do you have to have documents signed with Apple or the telecom provider? I have no idea. But
Mm-hmm.
right now, nobody does anything. And it's really weird if you think about it, because we
Mm-hmm.
have this whole legislation and everybody is so hyped up about data leaks. I mean, literally using your phone is like a constant data leak then.
Yeah.
So that was one. Forget about the Chinese stuff and possible listening in. So that's one thing. If you think about that, and then take that to what you're doing and what you said, and then look at legislation, the European AI Act. I don't know if you studied it. It's actually it makes a lot of sense. And in America, there's a lot happening on that realm as well. I think it's like in the UK, same. It's like copies of. Um, how do you view that companies that you know are investing in AI, conversational AI, are going to handle this? Because is it going to hold them back, or is it like the handbrake, or is it something? Okay, we take it into consideration, but we're still moving forward at high speed, and I mean relevant investments or relevant things, not just because it's hyped.
Um, I think you have probably two types of company right now. Those who clearly move very fast, and I think more often than not um, have made the news for the wrong reasons. And then the rest of the world that is, I think, kind of taking some stock. I mean, if we think about Gen AI in the context of conversational AI, um, most most organizations, I think, have started with it being internal, adding in Hightail, human in the loop, so that they are protecting their brand. So I think most organizations are going down the route of we need to make sure that we're protecting our brand and protecting our data. But clearly, you have those that have decided to do a bit more. And you have DPD in the UK, which is a
Parcel,
logistics firm. Yeah,
yeah,
you have Air Canada. I don't know whether you saw. You might not have made it across
yeah, it did. We
the
saw it
yeah
here.
the. Have you seen the Washington lottery?
No, didn't
Okay,
see
this
that
one
one.
this one's a really interesting one. So the Washington lottery allowed you to enter who you were or upload a photo of yourself, and it was going to present back to you what you would be doing if you won the lottery.
Hmm.
Great example, right? Similar to my travel and hospitality one. Unfortunately, one of the responses was an orgy. So somebody,
Oh, oh my God!
so you can imagine
No guardrails.
nothing
Oh,
there. So yeah, that was an interesting one. So it was yeah a sexually inappropriate scene that this lottery winner. Now, what I don't know is whether they then bought one ticket or 10,000 tickets. I don't know, but you can see what a great user case that is. Okay, are you more or less likely to buy a lottery ticket if you see yourself living a different life as a result of winning the lottery?
but isn't there a moral imperative or something here? Because basically, your lottery ticket's also gambling, but maybe in a
Hmm.
lesser form. But you're pushing people to put money in something which is sort of gambling. Is that you're nudging them, and it's not necessarily good nudge? Is that ethical? You find that your personal opinion? I understand.
Hmm.
Business wise, they could think otherwise,
Yeah.
whatever they want. But from a tech perspective, what do you think?
Do you know what? I think it's a great user case, to be honest. I appreciate the fact that they are trying to use Gen AI in the way that Gen AI can be used. And this is not about cost saving, right? This is a revenue improvement in revenue generation. I applaud the thinking there. Why? Because it's outside the box and it's using the capabilities. Going back to my earlier point, is it ethical? It's one of those gray areas, right? Probably not. Okay, probably not. But I applaud the fact that they have tried to do something that is innovative and different and is geared around building revenue, not about cutting heads. Yeah, that is
I
the
agree
other.
with that.
That's the other thing, right? Everyone is transfixed at the moment on using Gen AI to reduce, in the main, reduce human effort. Funnily enough, there's another post I put on LinkedIn a few weeks ago now that's still doing the rounds, and it was there was a lady on Twitter who had basically said, why on earth are we spending all of this time, money, on effort on building things to be creative when that's the one thing I, as a person, actually want to do, but don't have the time because I'm washing the dishes, washing the clothes, and cleaning the house. I was like, what a great thought that is. Why are we like the things that we like as people? We are basically outsourcing to AI, and we're leaving ourselves with all of the boring stuff that takes us away from doing the things that we like. Another great post there. So, you know, the I think we have an opportunity now with this technology to do some great things. There is clearly issues with the potential of this when it is used or tricked from bad actors. Where there's a will, there's a way. All of this technology can be can be utilized in ways that are very difficult to put safeguards around. Is what we seem to find, but that's people purposely doing this. Like they are purposely trying to create a bad story. To the detriment, I would suggest, of the vast majority of people who just want to utilize the technologies in order to, create better experiences, gain improved resolutions, and so on and so on. So clearly, to your original question, which is, what do we need to do around governance and data privacy and protection and security and all of these things. I think we have to be very mindful of this. There is, unlike other technologies, there is a true ability to do both great things and also things that other technologies just haven't been able to do. This ability to create things that we have not stipulated. It's a very shaky ground for an enterprise. Like we like assurance, okay? This is the rules, this is the policies, this is that. Even when we're in the world of conversational AI, you would literally script every single thing that is written or said, spoken or in text form by your automation platforms. And that would go through customer experience and marketing, and then they'd be debating individual words. Do we say this or should we say that? So to go from that amount of scripting to something that is, in theory, you can ask the same question to the same model and get a slightly different response. That level of assurance is no longer there. So I just think, and I've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months working with organizations on their policies, their procedures, their governance, building, process. And all we have to try and do, I think, with this is you have to be mindful. I think you have to have a set of principles, and you have to have a process around it. I don't think so that you're at least aware. And I think there's risks that are attached to that awareness, and then your appetite for how risky you want to be is down to a company basis. But security around Gen AI, I was with Microsoft yesterday, and every other word that they spoke about was how they are trying to make this as secure as possible.
I find that so funny. Sorry, Wayne, I find not what you said, but Microsoft saying we make it as secure as possible. I have nothing against Microsoft, by the way. But a couple months ago, where there was this article saying that if you get into a legal proceedings using, I think it was Copilot or something, or copyright problems or whatever, um, who'll pay for your legal fees using their AI, basically. I think it was OpenAI
Mm-hmm.
through them. And I read this like this can't be true. If you supply a good product, don't tell me to go to court. Um, and then in the small print, it said, "Oh, by the way, you have to comply with everything we said you needed to do in terms of settings and blah 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 blah." I'm like, nobody does that. Otherwise, you get no results. So you have to divert something, do something different in order to get
Mm-hmm.
something. So nobody is protected by this story. Um, And that's one thing if you pay my legal fees. But if I am liable and I have to pay damage, who's going to pay that? That could go
Mm-hmm.
into big numbers. So I'm like, if you have to write that, then there's something fundamentally wrong with what you're doing. You
Mm-hmm.
can't guarantee. And I think that's an inherent risk companies should understand. It's like, okay, well, what are we actually buying? And don't buy into the beautiful stories.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, check the use case. Is it really necessary? And if it is necessary, or it brings the revolution,
Mm-hmm.
make sure you do it the right way. And there's another thing I think that's dangerous, and they should be mindful of. It's the total vendor lock-in. I have this theory, not theory. I have this vision where what I see happening is I see if you look at the profits of Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Alphabet, Google,
Mm-hmm.
and you look at that, you say, okay, most of their profits come from cloud computing.
Yep.
That's it was recently in the news. So I'm not making this up. So that's one thing. If you then see that all three companies and some other companies, but they're really, really, really pushing hard to use their AI or use AI through their cloud computing. Now, if you think about that, the only one thing they do is a full lock-in because once you have their AI on their cloud in every corner of your company, basically doing nothing locally, and then you start firing people because that's usually what happens because they become more efficient. And then they have this nice knob on their system. It's called price. And they start turning it because you have more margin. In my opinion, you basically hand over full control over a lot of your operational cost to one of these big tech companies. And for European companies, you're also handing it over to the States, which the European Parliament really doesn't want. So this vendor lock-in risk in cloud computing and in I think it's an inherent risk which is not properly addressed by companies because they all look at, oh, it's so great, we go into the cloud and we're scalable and blah 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 blah. But their data is also there. And what happens if something goes wrong, like the Houthis cutting the cable? Um, there's more
Mm-hmm.
cables to be cut. If I look at that, I'm like, yeah, I think as in the boardroom, you should consider this risk and mitigate it. And if you don't mitigate it, you're taking a risk that is you can't even calculate how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you guys view that, but or how you view that. But is it something? And I find people are closing their eyes to it or putting their like an ostrich, putting their head in the sand, like nah, it's not there. But we also said about an pandemic, it's never going to happen. It happened.
Mm-hmm. Um, so I think vendor lock-in's real, definitely, and I think there's a few mitigation steps in the Gen AI space. One of them, I'm working with a particular startup that just came out of stealth called Emma, and
Called how?
EMA.
Emma.
Yep.
Oh, email. Okay.
And the reason why I appreciate this particular tool is that it's model agnostic, and therefore you have a master model that's like, hey, in this particular problem, I need to use this model or that model. And so, you depending on where you are from a region, if you're in Europe, maybe you want to use Mistral. Maybe you want to use some of these open source models. I mean, Llama 3 was launched yesterday or the day before.
Yep.
Um, so, it's GPT 3.5 Turbo or GPT-4, and obviously there's a big cost difference between those. And why would you want to use a really powerful model or something that's very simple? And so, having a capability, let's say, that limits your reliance on a single model, I think is an important first step. And I've seen this in the conversational AI space as well. Those organizations where, whether it's an IBM Watson, it's a Google Dialogflow, it's in the past Microsoft Lewis, they had these again, another thing. If you were an Azure house, then you would use this Microsoft suite of language models, and there's a conversational platform called OneReach. And the reason why I really appreciate these guys is they were like, hey, we don't care which model, we're actually going to have all of them, and then we'll figure out, our technology will figure out which one provides the best response, and therefore you are limiting your reliance again on a single vendor. So I think there are ways of avoiding some lock-in, but it's so difficult to get out of the mindset of, well, we'll just add it to the bill. We'll just add it to the bill. We already have this master agreement, so it's fine. We'll just add it to the bill. And I think, as you say, there's a head in sand moment where suddenly you are almost unable to get away from this provider without it costing you a significant amount of money. But we see this everywhere, though. We shouldn't think it's just AI. One of the areas that I concentrate on is contact center, and we see this and have seen this with technologies in that area as well, where it's not that you're locked in because you built so much complexity. So complexity is causing you to be locked in, and the cost to unpick all of this complexity is much greater than the value of moving to a different technology. So, it's not just the amount that you consume. Often it can be about the level of complexity and personalization that you've put in, which can also keep you locked in. So I think that there are ways that you can limit your need to stay with individual vendors. And I think those organizations that are building and using with that in mind will be the ones that are like, yeah, do you know what? We'll just move to GCP because I'm not going to renew with you at this point because of X, Y, and Z. So I think you do have to. I think it's an excellent point that you raised. I think there is a lot of blindly going down a certain route. And if technology has taught us anything over the past 20 years, it's that there are no sure bets forever. There are no sure bets forever. And therefore ensuring that you are at least aware and building with a future possibility of, let's just say, porting your capabilities from one to another across all of your technology stacks is important. I've been saying this for a while, but if you can get to a point where you are building a capability where you can snap in and snap out individual components without ripping out the whole thing, that's got to be the right approach. But again, I still feel we're a little way away from that being the norm. More of it's like an architectural principle that generally doesn't get deployed in reality.
Uh, uh, I don't know, but I think also if you look at the data part, companies are moving, and governments also. A lot of the data is in the cloud somewhere. Um, and if you think about, okay, we said a pandemic can't happen. It did happen. We said no, nobody's going to cut the internet cables. Well, it already happened. It had some impact, but not really big. But what if you cut the cable between the transatlantic cable? Then we have a bigger problem, or cables. Um, and in the North Sea, they're not that deep, so it's not a. I wouldn't say it shouldn't be a problem, but it's a risk, and they're not really secure. So if you think about that, and your data is somewhere, think about the impact on the financial system, for instance, or medical, if you can't access the data you need in order to work. So all these people will be behind their desks or at home working. Well, there's no data. Sorry, you can't access your data. So I presume, or my assumption is that we are moving toward a situation where you get these hybrid configurations where you would have either the original data on your own server and a SaaS solution access your server via an API to get the proper data and put it, do what I have to do, put back the new data, but you have full control of your own data. And I think that is, and if that company has a leak, you just close the API. That's it. You're done. You're safe. I would presume, if I look at the risks involved, that you would move to such a situation where, okay, I scale with cloud, but I run stuff locally because maybe it seems more expensive. It might be in the long run. It's probably not,
Hmm.
because if I've seen some bills, cloud computing bills, AI bills, you're prone to get a heart attack if you see these amounts of money. If you're really successful or using it a lot, that bill goes up. It's like the hockey stick, but the wrong one,
Yeah.
and it's exponential.
Well, there's not just that particular cost as well. The actual cloud compute, but you mentioned data and where it's stored and how accessible it is, and the chance of the internet cables being cut are there's always a risk there. There's more of a risk that someone's going to get access to your data in one way or another. I just saw a recent example here in the US. I was reading the impact of that. It's a big healthcare provider over here, and they're estimating that the cost of this data breach was $1.6 billion. So there are of course that's a huge amount of money. So basically put a part of their business out of action for just 3 weeks. So the revenue impact and the additional fixes that they're having to put in place at 1.6 billion. So which, to be fair, cloud bills generally not that expensive, right? So there are other risks associated with this, and again, I think that the issue is we just need to awareness is key, and so we do need to think about that, right? Just I think the more people that are aware and thinking about these things, the better. But it's so difficult for many older organizations to unpick the legacy. I see this in contact center. I see this elsewhere. That is nigh on impossible for many organizations. And so I think it's just one of those problems that's going to have to be managed, as opposed to something where a solution is going to come that's basically going to re-architect an organization that's 50 years old, 100 years old. It's just not going to happen. So I think we just need to accept that there are risks associated with it. And I think what you're going to find is most businesses are going to continue to build Frankenstein's monster because they do not have the time, patience, or runway in order to make fundamental changes to their back end architecture. They don't have the funds and also the will, because imagine if you are changing all of that, then you are standing still. And we know that if you're standing still at the moment, you're probably moving backwards because of the pace of change that we're seeing. So yeah, another good question, and I don't think there's necessarily an easy answer on any of that.
If you were in charge of such a process, or you would be in a company where they would have the a legacy, and you're stuck and for the choice, do something, do nothing, or do a little bit, how would you go about it?
My personal preference, and this is going back 15, 20 years, has always been the start again alongside your existing running. Like, what would you do
Basically,
now? What would you do now, and then migrate over at some point? Like that. That's always, and it sounds a lot easier than I'm sure it is. But there are good examples of where that has happened. And I don't think there's any way around it, because iterative change is still iterative, right?
it
If we
doesn't
are
work.
going to change, if we're going to create a significant impact on legacy, if we are going to create a future state, I don't see how you can do that by iterative pulling this out and pulling that in. I think you almost have to start again from a technology, from a foundational base, and then figure out a migration path, so that you can continue to keep your as is running while creating that future state. That's always been my as I say, it's not a new area of thinking. And you might say, well, why do we need to do that? Um, why? Because my original thoughts used to be around create a new brand, or acquire a new brand that was set up for the 21st century and then migrate over. But a lot of these organizations that um, have a significant amount of legacy also have a brand recognition that is incredibly difficult to just replicate. It's one thing you can't do, right? You can't buy history. And so I think I kind of moved quickly past the fact that you could create this other brand and then just migrate your customers over, because you lose something there. You lose history and brand recognition, and that's an incredibly difficult thing to get back, especially depending on who your customer base is, depending on what products are that you're selling. So I think almost starting from scratch and then a migration plan would and has been my way of trying to tackle this in the past.
It's funny you see this as the way forward. I In one of the companies I worked for, I suggested this because the stock between a rock and a hard place. It's in financial services. So the problem is always, the software lasts about 7 years, and then you need to migrate. The software was running for much longer time. So the only way forward, in my opinion, was okay. Let's rent the office across the street. Start with a small team and slowly get groups of customers into your new way of working, and the staff as well. And whoever can follow, great. And if you can't follow, you don't want to, then okay. And at some point, the old office just disappears, and the customer really, is actually amazed by the service or the system, and it's better. But what you see is most companies are not doing it, and I'm wondering, is that because they lack courage, they lack knowledge, or is it a money thing? Because my opinion is doing it the way you suggested is in the end cheaper than creating more complexity. Because what I see in all the companies I've seen, the cost of complexity in time, plotted in time, is a hockey stick.
Hmm.
It's exponential. And when they start cutting costs, they can't cut cost on the system because it has become so complex and all the people around it. And then you start cutting costs in the wrong places in the company, and then that's the path down. So is it money? Is it courage? Is it, ballsiness or lack of vision, or maybe something positive? I don't know. Not sure what it could be. How do you view that?
Um, I Probably all of those things. Uh,
Oh, you made it really complex.
yeah, I think it's all. I think it's all of those things. As I say, I think it's a really difficult one to. It sounds a lot simpler than what it is. So you think
I
about
know.
the size of some of these legacy companies. It's not just one office in one place. It's um, 100 offices in 100 different countries. It's a significant undertaking. Often, individual countries have their own in, individual architectures, their own systems. It's huge. I mean, the
But
cost associated with all of this is massive. So I think cost always comes into it. Cost has always got to be the one underlying thing. And I can you correctly categorize what the value is by working in a different way? And can you look at that value not just over a 1, a 3, or a 5 years, but can you see what the value is over the next 20 or 30 years? Because in theory, that's what you're setting up for. That's what you should be setting up for. It's not a 3 to 5 year business case. It's a 20 to 30 year one. But again, I don't think there's necessarily any particular one thing that is stopping organizations. I think it is just such a big change. And let's be honest, the people who are running this, like the average CIO, CTO in these big organizations, 2 to 3 year cycles.
it's like the government.
Yep, exactly. So I have a vision. This is what we're going to do. 2 to 3 years in, different CIO, slightly different vision. I'm going to do a reorg. Going to stop this. It's like there's no continuity of leadership, and therefore,
Hold on, Wayne? Are you saying or suggesting sounds not nice, but that the lack of a it's not the lack of a long term vision. They all create strategies and long term vision and a lot of blah blah. But knowing that okay, I need to have a result in 2 or 3 years because my bonus, shareholder value, I don't know, 100 other million things. But because actually we have a long term vision, but executing with a short term vision, because that's what's happening. That's why it becomes incremental.
mhm,
Because otherwise, I would be spending too much money and wasting too much resources on changing or innovating. Whereas in some other countries, you see it in Japan a lot, or or Oriental and Middle Eastern countries, they actually have they have a game plan. They have a
mhm,
much longer vision and act on it. If you look at companies like Toyota or whatever, they it's different. Also, leadership is longer in place.
mhm,
So is it part of a problem in the Western world that basically leadership stays in for a short time, is being pushed by creating shareholder value, um, and not doing this? Basically, the same problem governments have. You know, you're in your position as a minister or part of a cabinet for 4 years maximum,
mhm,
usually shorter. So I need to show results. Oh well, then all the good plans go into a drawer, and the shitty plans that window dressing.
mhm,
Um, that's actually I think what you're saying in terms of system development. Incremental is window dressing. It's solving well some problems we have,
yep.
but you're not chopping off the tree at its root cause.
No, as I say, digital iteration versus digital transformation, and I think it's a very astute point that you pulled out. It really is as a result of that, short term, quarter to quarter view that you need to be showing value, and small, the smaller window that a C-suite exec would have in many organizations in the Western world, and that not being able to implement a longer term vision. And you see it all of the time. I see it here all of the time. We're talking here about CTOs, CIOs, 12 months in post. I'm like,
Wow.
well,
That,
what are you going to be able to do? It's probably taking you 12 months just to really understand what are the problems, and not necessarily do a load to solve them. Um, and I
so,
think
sorry.
I can say I think we're in this position now where we expect, because technology is changing exponentially, it's changing so fast. I think we expect that we should be able to turn oil tankers around within a second. And the reality is, to your point earlier, look, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years of complexity. We really need to unpick all of this, and that does take time. But it's also not showing immediate value, and because it's not showing immediate value, we kind of just put it back in a cupboard. Okay, we'll come back to this. Well, really, we won't. But we'll now concentrate on this shiny thing over here, which will be an iterative thing. It just adds on top of the complexity that we already have, but we can show some immediate value now, versus some value over the next 5 to 10 years. It's just a symptom of the fact that you know analysts are constantly analyzing your financial and business performance, your strategy, and shareholder value is right up there as a key priority of large organizations. And of course, it should be in the long term, not necessarily always in the short term. And I think that sometimes gets lost.
You triggered an idea. Maybe it's already out there. Um, because if you think about this, and you said analysts, I think they're part of the problem, but also part of the solution. What if the buy, hold, or sell strategy for a company listed at stock market, part of one of the things they analyze, call it a KPI or something else, is a score on the longevity of your digital transformation where applicable. I mean, if you're, I don't know, construction company, it's a different story,
Mm-hmm.
but partly a different story. But IT oriented company, or that's the big backbone of your company, then why shouldn't you have a score on that? I mean, we have ESG norms, right, where
Mm-hmm.
we tell, okay, how green are you, or socially responsible? Why not on digital transformation? And there's a scoring mechanism on it where you say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, you're at 9 or you're at 4. If you're at 4, basically you're going for short-term shareholder value, and that's not good. That has an impact on your share price.
Mm-hmm.
So that would assume sell, because you're in the long run you're not going to be. I think that would be a driving force, because they're based on, a lot of the CEOs are, at least in the US, are their performance is rated on the stock value, stock
Mm-hmm.
price. What if the stock price is influenced by, well, it is influenced by analysts. Um, so what if you add that to the mix? And a bad score means you get a sell. That means your price goes down.
Mm-hmm.
I think then you get a different strategy in the boardroom. Or am I totally off?
I don't know. I mean, I can't see why the thinking is incorrect, right? So, putting a value on long term transformation and plans, I'm sure that is already taken
I don't
into
know.
account. I would like to think it is. Um, so I certainly don't disagree that that is an area that maybe it's just not weighted particularly high, right? Because it's short term cash, short term revenue numbers. Did you hit your forecasts? If not, why not? Everything is geared towards those very short term financial metrics. And maybe the weighting of, okay, well, we can see what you're doing here. Things aren't going as well. But actually, do you know what? Your 7 year transformation, you're only in year two of your 7 year transformation. We're going to give you some leeway because you actually told us that you were going to be concentrating on long term value, not short term revenue. So we'll give you an out. And I think some of that can happen. But yeah, I think it's a cultural thing that is going to be very very difficult to break. I don't think it will break. I think I remember one example in the UK where an organization, I want to say it was an insurance firm, new CEO basically came in and said, "Guess what? We're concentrating on the long term here. I'm not going to give you a quarterly forecast. I'm not going to tell you what the quarterly numbers are, and we're not going to discuss it on a quarterly basis. We are in it for the long term. If you want to be with us, be with us. If you want a quarterly revenue number and you just for the short term, not entirely sure that we will want your investment." And I don't want to miss say the name. I think I know what it is, but I can't remember exactly. So I'll
It's
just
not
say,
relevant. It's a thought.
but that longer term view and honesty was a very bold move, but also one that for them really did pay off in the end.
I can it resonates with me. It sounds a bit like family businesses, big family businesses, how they operate and run their long term strategies. Um, if I could ask you for one last statement or advice to companies out there struggling with their digital transformation, AI, not AI, how do I do? Where do I start? Well, what should they do or not do?
Yeah. My this just I would concentrate on the non-sexy stuff right now. It's really really difficult to get away from the hype, but if you really do want to set yourself up for success, then what you should really be thinking about now is simplification and also documentation. And they are both the most unsexy things to be talking about in this world of AI. And what do I mean by that? Well, we are, I mentioned the ball of yarn, right? Like unpicking some of this, not trying to replicate complexity in a on-prem solution with an in-cloud solution, right? No, take the opportunity not to migrate a mess, okay? You're just basically putting a mess, and it's not even necessarily a mess for less, right? You're moving a mess from one place to another. That mess is probably built up over 5, 10, 15, 20 years because at some point in the past that was relevant. We're now in the now. So number one, like let's where we can like reduce complexity because that is going to set you up for success in the future. And the second one is you would not believe how much knowledge is never documented. And one of the things that I'm working on with a number of clients is assisting them in the automation using Gen AI of really complex things. And the key thing that I learned within the first 2 or 3 months of doing this is the vast majority of the knowledge needed to resolve complexity is never written down. It's only in your people's heads. And so, unless you are able to extract that information and get it down on paper in one way, shape, or form, your Gen AI capabilities have not got a chance. Because if it can't read it, it cannot use it. And so that's kind of my two things, right? Make sure documentation is there and try and remove simplicity. It's not sexy. It's not using AI, but it is setting you up on a foundation to be able to use AI in a much better way than what organizations who are rushing in right now are doing.
Can I add one more thing to your very wise statement? That's based on my own experience. Whatever is written down, make sure it's properly written. Because with Gen AI, garbage in, if it's written shitty, Gen AI doesn't make it better.
Yeah.
You cause a lot of problems. And what you see, even though companies have documented a lot of it is poorly written. And as a consequence, when you start working with it, you run into millions of problems which you never expected because, hey, we have documented it. So that's the other tip I would add
Mhm.
to it. Um, and then I would like to thank you, Wayne, for this insightful, angerless. There was no anger here. Um, I didn't expect any conversation. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your wisdom. And let's stay in touch and keep me posted on all the
Excellent. Well,
developments.
thank you very much for having me. As I say, I did say right at the beginning, my friends would find it hilarious that I was ever angry
Oh, you now
because
have the proof.
that really is not me. But I do think that there is so many things being said, and there's an echo chamber that it frustrates me. And so I'm pleased we got to discuss a lot of that today and a lot more. And so thank you.
You're welcome, and we agree. We fully agree on this. So take care and speak to you soon.
Thank you, Doran.